Handstands are one of those skills that we can all appreciate because many of us will have tried to do it at some point. The thing is, if you're trying to learn how to do a handstand, we can be overwhelmed by the number of progressions that are open to us, and understanding which is the best handstand progression can be a challenge. So today we're going to be digging into the meat of this and ranking every handstand progression, but because many of these progressions tailor to different handstand goals, to keep this simple, we are only going to be judging each handstand progression on its ability to get us to a point where we can understand how to balance a handstand, nothing else. So without further ado, let's get into the first one, which is the dish hold. This is a common one seen on handstand tutorials, and I get why. The idea is to work the core in a way that prevents spine extension while the hands are stretched above the head and the legs are held up off the ground. And great beginner core exercise as it is, I have two issues with it in the context of handstand training. First is that it does nothing for balance, the essence of today's discussion. And second is that we're not training the core in the same plane of movement as we would in a handstand, where one is horizontal and one is vertical. So for this reason, the Honor hold sits in D tier. Now the next exercise remedies many of the issues that we've just spoken about, and it is the chest to wall handstand. Now here we have an exercise that is very handstand specific. We're in a handstand, we have an element of balance in that we need to stay upright against the wall, and not only are we now working the core with a specificity to handstand, but we also have the wall that gives us that tactile feedback that we need so that we cannot cheat ourselves. It's also incredibly scalable. Don't have the strength to do a chest to wall handstand, or you have a fear of falling? We can alter the incline until we have the confidence in order to get to the wall. Chest to wall handstand should be an inclusion at every single level of handstand training, S tier. The frog stand is an exercise that allows beginners to understand the mechanics of balancing a handstand while still staying low to the ground. Some can learn this in seconds, while others is a tricky skill in its own right. What I love about the frog stand is that it can also be used as a form of handstand entry and even has a bit of carryover to planche work, so you can get more bang for your buck by training this. Many people learn how to handstand without ever having tried to do a frog stand, but because of the benefits it delivers, I'll place it in the B tier. Only missing out on A tier because I believe some of the other progressions that we're going to be discussing today do a better job at helping us understand how to balance a handstand. Next we have shoulder taps, and I think I'll trigger a few people here by saying that this is something that beginners just shouldn't go anywhere near. The point of this exercise is to drill pushing tall with straight arms and elevated shoulders, and the unilateral nature of this exercise implies that we can eliminate any imbalances that we may have. The thing is, to do this exercise and do it well, we need a silly amount of strength. If we can all agree that the goal is to A, keep the arms straight, B, not lose any of the elevation in the scapula, and C, keep the body straight, so no arching of the back or folding to the side, then honestly, how many beginners can do this without popping out a shoulder? What typically happens is that shoulder taps end up looking like this, just us pressed against the wall, swaying from side to side, basically programming in bad habits. No, this is a decent exercise, just not one that as beginners really helps us learn how to balance, so for this reason, D tier. A more fitting exercise for a beginner to do instead is wall walks. Here we still need to hold our arms straight, we train unilaterally, and we get the tactile feedback of the wall that we just mentioned with chest to wall handstands. So we get all of the benefits looked for with shoulder taps, except with far less intensity because half of the rep is done at a lower center of mass. But remember, the way that we're ranking all of these progressions today is by asking the question of, does it help with balance? And when it comes to wall walks, the answer is yes, to a point. If you have any imbalances in strength arm to arm, it will make balancing significantly more difficult. So by drilling this imbalance out and pressing taller with both of our arms straight, it will make it far easier to balance. So I'll put this in the B tier. Okay, so up to now we've spoken about exercises that deal more with the skill aspect of handstand training. But when it comes to the strength side, we may look to overhead pressing exercises. By this I mean exercises such as the military press, the Z press, pike push-ups, because when we start out, a lot of handstanding is strength related. I mean, we are holding ourselves upside down on our hands after all, and so it's understandable how getting stronger so that we're not shaking from the effort will make it easier to balance a handstand. That being said, this only works to a point, because past being strong enough to hold yourself upside down, you could do as many pike push-ups or overhead presses as you want, it still will never get you to learn how to handstand. So for that reason, C tier. And on that note, actually, we'll quickly rank global pushing movements. Here I'm talking about exercises like dips and push-ups. Again, highly valuable exercises that should be part of every training regimen, but because these are less handstand specific even than overhead pressing, we'll place these in D tier. Next we have the back to wall handstand, the sister exercise to the chest to wall, where the latter places more of a spotlight on body line, the back to wall focuses more on balance. With the back to wall, we use our fingertips to practice keeping our weight center, using the fingertips to push away from the wall and the heels of our hands to bring us back. This is the very heart of hand balancing, so for that reason, S tier. A similar exercise that I see as well is the back to wall kick up. This is where we kick up against the wall for reps. Now, without any context, somebody walking past this might look at this and think that it's extremely dumb. Why are we bruising the wall? But actually, challenge is a problem that many beginners have, and it's that we're not kicking up high enough. Without bringing the hips high over the shoulder, we will always fall back. And once again, the wall is here to keep us honest, because if we don't hit it, we've failed. But this progression does have a drawback in that it practices the kick up without any of the element of actually holding that handstand. So for that reason, it doesn't quite make the S tier. Another one that will probably trigger a lot of people, I'll hold my hands up, I really do not rate the headstand. Fine, it gets us used to being upside down, but for anyone saying that it develops good body line, it really doesn't. Handstands are all about the shoulders, but headstands take them completely out of the equation. Every single progression we've discussed so far, even the detail ones, improve on either the strength or the mobility of our shoulders to some extent. If we had an E tier, I'd put headstands in there as well, but oh well. Another general set of conditioners next, and I'll simply label them shoulder mobility work. And in here, I'll include the butcher's block, external scapular rotation exercises like the face pull or YTW, and even wall variations of the tuck handstand. Crowd in the same way that if we're not strong enough to hold up our body weight, if we are fighting against the mobility of our shoulders, we will always find balancing a real challenge. Having more mobile shoulders will improve the success rate of our kick up to handstand, and will also make holding a handstand far easier, so for that reason these go into the A tier. The L-sit might be a strange inclusion here, but I will give it a mention seeing as it is technically hand balancing. I think for beginners, the L-sit can be a great way for getting the ball rolling for a series of calisthenics skills and acts as a counterbalance to all of the overhead pressing by working on that opposite movement, namely scapular depression. Love it, it was the first skill I learned, but because it doesn't directly assist with balance, C tier. If you're working on multiple ways to enter the handstand, or even trying to learn the handstand on the floor and on parallettes, I would advise you to stop. Pick one, stick to it, and then if you want to learn other ways of entering a handstand, develop them once you can already balance. Various handstand entries, D tier. Cartwheel is next, and this is here to support with those that have a fear of falling. Cartwheeling, or even deliberately kicking up into a handstand with the intention of falling, can remove all of that fear that can stop us from being able to balance. But once you've removed that fear, we still need to practice on balancing. So for that reason, this sits in C tier as well. Spotting a handstand is another way to practice, and this is a weird one because the effectiveness of this exercise is dependent extremely heavily on the person spotting you. Somebody who spots us poorly can make us waste months of time, but an experienced spotter can supercharge our progress. So because the value of this progression is heavily dependent on the individual, we're going to rank these as C tier. We absolutely love the wall when it comes to handstands, but we have to talk about freestanding attempts. Eventually, we'll have to learn how to handstand in free space, so it makes sense to also practice in free space. In reality, there are people who just do this, and handstands eventually click for them, but us mere mortals will need some of these other supporting progressions. I'm going to rank this progression as S tier, and if you want to know how to improve your handstand kick-up success rate, then check out this video.